That's Lynette.
The top right?
Is that Linnea?
That's Lynette.
Oh, Linnea.
Water over there.
No,
Sorry.
no water.
All right, so we're doing Oppenheimer tonight, everybody. Hope you know that. So I'm Ed Katz, a little intro. There's some new faces, which is always great to see. Appreciate you coming. And so I was doing theater and film reviews for a radio station in Connecticut for a couple of years just before we moved here. And I was a film major as one of my majors in college. And I do marketing and public relations by day, and this is the fun stuff I do at night. So if you're not already, if you're on Facebook, please follow katzreviews.com on Facebook. I'm around 600 followers now, so that would be great to get to 600.
Is that Carrie?
How are you?
Oh, well, I'm getting better. I was
Good.
having some issues, but I'm much better now. Thanks for asking.
Three something.
All right, let's get started. All right, so I don't know, I guess you could see most of the people here. There's a few off camera, but we've got close to 20 here and then another handful or so on Zoom. All right, so starting off on Oppenheimer. Who thought the movie was well done?
I fell asleep.
Okay, all right.
Sure.
And who did
No.
not think it was? Hands up. Okay, none. All right. So somewhere in the middle. No. Okay, so pretty much everyone thought it was well done. All right, great. So now, did you like it? Yes or no? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was hard to hear. It was incredible. The words.
Yes, we'll talk about that too. That's a good point. It was a little hard to hear some of the words. Right.
I think the difference between watching it at home and in the movies was probably night and day. Oh, really?
Because you couldn't pause it. In the movies, 'cause we saw it, and actually, ironically, I just found out, because it came up on Facebook, Ann and I saw the movie in the theaters exactly 1 year ago today. It was pretty funny. So I had no idea until all of a sudden it came up.
Oh, yeah, really bad.
Right, at home, we could put on subtitles and we can pause it. And on Amazon, when you pause it, it shows you who the actors are and who they're playing. And
Right.
Yeah.
there were so many scientists, you didn't know who's who.
Yeah.
So that was harder. So to follow it live in the theater, it was tougher, but the visual impact and the sound was incredible in the theater. So it was still great being at home and being able to do it over 2 nights like we did, which I think was also a little helpful to break it up. It's 3 hours. So it worked out. Okay. Rotten Tomatoes is consensus, which the critics gave it a 93%, audiences a 91. And on IMDb, where anything a 7.0 or better out of 10, they gave it an 8.3, which is one of the highest ever. Rotten Tomatoes summary said, Oppenheimer marks another engrossing achievement from Christopher Nolan that benefits from Cillian Murphy's tour de force performance and stunning visuals. And the audience consensus was, it's an intelligent movie about an important topic that's never less than powerfully acted and incredibly entertaining. The production budget was $100 million. And they actually made a lot of cuts to get down to 100 million. Including cutting 30 days off the production schedule. Remember, he also filmed it in IMAX. So the 70 millimeter film.
Wow.
The weight of the film itself, the film stock, was 600 pounds.
The what was?
The weight of the film.
And Kodak,
What is that megatron? Megatron.
so, and Kodak had to make special black and white IMAX film because they had never done that. And they were trying to match the look of the rest of the movie, and they fiddled with it and finally got it. At the box office, as the last total I could see, it was almost $54 million. So close to $1 billion. So, and Christopher Nolan got paid 15% of the gross.
The gross?
Yeah.
You should have invested.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is that?
Pretty good.
$150 million?
Well, it ended up, by the time everything was done and they calculated after taxes, paying his agent, his lawyers, all that, he still got over $70 million. So.
She almost as good as a professional golfer.
Right, for live, right.
Yeah.
All right, so Academy Awards, it won 7, it won Best Actor, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Robert Downey Jr., very deserved, right? Cinematographer, I think this is the fourth movie he worked with the cinematographer, whose name is hard to pronounce. I think it's Hoyte van Hoytema. The score one also, Ludwig Göransson, and film editing, Jennifer, either Lam or Lame, spelled Lame, but I don't know if that's the way you pronounce it. It was also nominated in 6 other categories. Sounds, Emily Blunt was nominated, screenplay was nominated, costume, hair, production design. Some nice cameos. Tom Conti played Einstein. Gary Oldman played President Truman. And Kenneth Branagh played Professor Niels Bohr. Okay, so anyone have any comments before we get started? I'm going to go into some of Chris Nolan's background, but anyone have any comments first to get started? Not right now. Okay. So Nolan was born in 1970. He's British and American. He was raised a little overseas and then came over. His films altogether have earned over $6 billion worldwide, making him the 7th highest grossing director of all time. He was knighted in 2024 for his contributions to film. He studied English Lit at University College in London, made short films. His first feature was something called Following, which got pretty bad reviews from 1998. It's really not even available streaming. But his second film was Memento in 2000, which was a very powerful, dynamic, low-budget movie. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's about a guy who has very, very short-term memory. Anything more than 15 minutes, he forgets. So he makes notes to himself and tries to solve the murder of his wife. It's a fascinating movie. Then he also made Insomnia, the Dark Knight trilogy, which made him a ton of money and everybody else a ton of money. The Prestige with Hugh Jackman, Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio, Interstellar, and then Dunkirk was his other most pretty much acclaimed movie in 2017. Also set around a similar time, World War II. And he left, I think he was with Warner, and he left Warner Brothers because he didn't like the way they did the distribution for Tenet, which was his previous movie before this one. And he signed with Universal, and they promised they would do a wide theatrical release. And boy, did that work out well for them. Okay, so let's see. So Nolan, his films include metaphysics. He gets into existentialism, ethics, the construction or deconstruction in some cases of time, and the malleable nature of memory and personal identity. And he tried doing practical special effects. In fact, there was no CGI in this movie, which I didn't realize until I was researching it. No computer graphic images. So it was all real. I mean, they did special effects, but it was not computer generated. So the explosions that you saw when they were testing the bomb were real. They were miniature, but they were real. And they just did different takes and close-up angles to capture the explosions and slow them down. And that's how they made them look large.
Editing, it's gotta be extraordinary.
Yeah, the woman who was the editor was sort of complaining about the difficult task she had. Yeah.
Yeah,
But she won an Oscar, so I guess it was worth it.
wow.
Okay, growing up, he was particularly influenced by the work of Sir Ridley Scott, who did the original Blade Runner movie and also Alien, a couple of the Alien movies. And the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars. And okay, his brother also does things in the film and television world. Westworld on HBO was one of his brother's shows, Jonathan. And they used to make films together when they were kids. So about his style, right? Oh, a filmmaker, Guillermo del Toro, called Nolan an emotional mathematician. BBC's arts editor, Will Gompertz, described him as an art house auteur making intellectually ambitious blockbuster movies that can leave your pulse racing and your head spinning. And another guy wrote, his films allow art house regulars to enjoy superhero flicks and multiplex crowds to engage with labyrinthine plot conceits. And he views himself as an indie filmmaker working inside the studio system. Okay. So there was a film author, Ian Nathan, and he wrote on Nolan as a filmmaker in 2022. He said, Christopher Nolan doesn't make sense. And that's exactly how he likes it. In 23 years and through 12 films, he's defied the laws of Hollywood by creating startling original genre pieces that have reveled in their own complexity, confounding every maximum by which the studios hope to appeal to the widest audience. And yet he does that too. Cinema's still on the possibility of the next Nolan film, whatever form it might take. And he wrote that before Oppenheimer. There was a 16-essay book, The Philosophy of Christopher Nolan, and professional philosophers and writers analyzed his work. Robbie Goh, a professor of English literature, described him as a philosophical filmmaker who includes philosophical ideas, existentialism, morality, epistemology, and the distinction between appearance and reality in films that frequently portray suspense, action, and violence. He appreciated his ability to incorporate such themes in films that possess elements of the Hollywood blockbuster, which help keep the audiences engaged, but remain more thoughtful and self-reflexive than the typical consumerist action film. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, I looked at 3 different rankings of all his movies. New York Magazine's, their Vulture website, Variety, and Yahoo's The Wrap all ranked his films differently. Oppenheimer came in #1 on one of them, #2 on another, and #3 on another. The other films that came in #1 was Dunkirk on one, The Dark Knight on another, and the other one where Oppenheimer was third that came in second was Memento. But they're all different. So anyway, if you haven't seen Dunkirk, well, The Dark Knight, that's a totally different kind of thing. But Memento is a great movie. Dunkirk is a phenomenal war movie, where it kind of looks, for the most part in the movie, like it was all done in one take. Continuous motion through the entire movie, 2 hours. It looks like it's one take. Pretty fascinating the way he pulled that off. All right.
But you said time, you described it as time, and that's what he does.
Yes,
He'll be crazy with this one.
yes.
without The time.
Sir.
Yeah, and then also the shifting between black and white and color. I read about that. There were 2 different takes on when it went to black and white. One, which makes sense about 3/4 of the time, but not the other quarter, was the black and white scenes are from Strauss's point of view, which was the Robert Downey Jr. character, which was interesting because he saw everything kind of in black and white to his own perception. And the other was, it had to do with, it was more complex and it wasn't very clear as to how they meant it, but it was just trying to startle the audience and kind of catch them off a little bit to make them think from a different perspective. So that was all I could get out of that, because when we were watching it, we were trying to figure out the black and white, and I thought it had to do with
That was black and white, yeah.
with how the perception of him was being looked at negatively. When they thought he was a communist or a possible traitor or a spy, but it's not that simple. It's really not that simple.
But all the scenes with Strauss were not in black and white.
Nope, but it was, when it was his perspective, it was supposed to be black and white.
But what about the scene where they're sitting around the table arguing? That was in color.
Right,
But
But
he,
because it
but he
was-
was,
it
but
was-
he was the main character in that scene.
right, but it wasn't really done from his perspective. It was done from the viewer's perspective of the conversation. But like I said, it's not perfect. It worked about 3/4 of the time for me, but not the other quarter, so that may be part of it. One thing that was interesting, remember I mentioned Nolan was inspired by 2001. And I want to go into something he said, because it's kind of cool, because he described a performance as one of the most underrated in film history, and it was Keir Dulley's performance in 2001. He said Kubrick and the film got all the accolades, and he said Keir Dulley held it together. And I'm mentioning that because I know Keir Dulley, and he's recovering from a bike injury. At some point, I would love to have him come on Zoom, and we would, hopefully discuss the film. But it was great to me when I'm reading that he's raving about that performance. He said Dulley was being able to make the most of the words on the page, which were never about anything other than the exact specific technical situation they're discussing, again in 2001. And yet for his money, the character comes through that. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now, Cillian Murphy, anyone familiar with him before this movie?
Joe, from 60 Minutes.
Right, he was interviewed, right?
Peaky Blinders, he was,
Mhm.
Tommy Shelby, he was the main guy.
Exactly.
Was it?
Peaky Blinders. He was Oppenheimer.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. So I remember, I first saw him, he was in a thriller I saw on cable called Red Eye. It was set in a plane, and he was basically a really bad guy. He was great in it. It was not a great movie. He was great. And I had never seen him before, and I was like, this guy's good, you know, and then sure enough, he does this. He was also in Sunshine in 2007. He played a transgender Irish woman in 2005 in a comedy drama called Breakfast on Pluto, and he got a Golden Globe Award nomination for that. I'm not familiar with the film, but I'm not sure today he would be cast as that, but you never know. It is acting, but you never know. All right, he collaborated with Christopher Nolan before. He was the Scarecrow in the Dark Knight trilogy, as well as in Inception and Dunkirk. And then, of course, he got the biggest exposure from Peaky Blinders, which ran for like 9 years, 2013 to 2022. Okay. Yeah, I don't need to go there. Okay, he also did some theater and won some awards in England for that. He was raised Catholic, attended Catholic secondary school, started performing. He was also a novelist named William Wall was his English teacher. He encouraged him to pursue acting, but he was set on becoming a rock star. In his late teens and early 20s, he sang and played the guitar in several bands alongside his brother, and the Beatles-obsessed duo named their most successful band the Sons of Mr. Green Jeans, which they adopted from the Frank Zappa song of that name. He said, and they were actually obviously not bad because they got offered a 5-record deal, but for a small amount of money. And he said, I'm very glad in retrospect we didn't sign because you kind of sign away your life to a label and the whole of your music. And he'd be tied up for 5 years making little money from everything, but it was a 5-record deal. He saw a stage production of A Clockwork Orange, and he began directing his attention to acting at that. Okay. CBS News interviewed him. He said that he lost 28 pounds for the role of Oppenheimer because in real life, Oppenheimer was 5'11" and 128 pounds. So he lost all the weight he could, sometimes eating just 1 almond a day. And when the cast was having all these meals together, he skipped them. So people thought he was antisocial. He tried explaining it and apologizing, saying, I just couldn't, he needed to do for the role. And he realized this was the role of a lifetime, so he put everything he had into it. I knew I had an awful lot of work to do as quickly as I could, he said. He took the role without having read the script because he worked on 4 other movies with Christopher Nolan. But he also knew it was going to be a challenge. I love work that is very, very challenging and scares the life out of you because you think, how am I going to do this? It's such a huge thing to take on. That's the stuff that really gets me going rather than something that I think I know how to do that. The work paid off, and he credits Nolan's direction and their shared understanding after working together on several films, which he said allowed him to fully immerse himself in the character. So, okay, my notes. Did anyone have any comments at this point? Okay, keep going. Just feel free to ask a question. So the movie starts with the quote about Prometheus, who's the character who was tortured forever. If you're not familiar with Prometheus, in mythology, he stole fire. Zeus punished him by tying him to a rock and having his liver exposed for an eagle to eat, and it would grow back every day, and the eagle would come back and eat it while he was tied to the rock. So it was kind of forever being tortured. But he was celebrated for his resilience and for, quote, bringing knowledge, progress, and power to humans. And then also they had the note about fission and security. Strauss was black and white at the Senate confirmation hearing. I'm writing note the rain and electricity atoms. So the rain, I'll get to the rain in a bit because the beginning of the movie started with the water and the drops, and then it kind of went to atoms and the effect and the ripples. So that kind of comes full circle with the atomic explosion. Okay, he was attending the lecture by Niels Bohr. Oh, he was ready to give the poison in the apple to the teacher.
Right.
Okay. Oppenheimer's son had an issue with that because he thought it didn't really happen. History's a little vague on that, so we don't know. But anyway, let's see. He was studying quantum mechanics, Caltech. Oh, Dr. Lawrence, who was played by Josh Hartnett. And then they had the communist influence. So he had people around him were communist. His lover was communist. One of his students, and his brother Frank was a communist. And then they had the quote, "And now I am death, destroyer of worlds." Okay, and then they wrote it in Sanskrit, right? Okay. They talked about the dark hole. Oh, and the chain reaction. And his paper got published. Now, Kitty Oppenheimer, played by Emily Blunt, starts out as a communist. Florence Pugh, who plays Jean Tatlock, his girlfriend or lover, over 9 years, he had this affair. She was his love interest. She was very much a communist. And then Oppenheimer even encourages union talk, and Josh Hartnett's Dr. Lawrence character warns him about it, saying that the government's spying. They know what he's doing, they're spying. And then that gets used against him later by Strauss, who convinces Borden, the investigator, about Oppenheimer and gives him a file, basically showing him he's a communist, but he's not the one who gave it to him, but somehow he got it. But he got it, he gave it. Okay, questions about the nuclear explosion. The general, you remember who the general was? Matt Damon, right. Another pretty good cameo. So Matt Damon made a joke. He was commenting how, Cillian Murphy had to lose weight for his role. With Matt Damon, it was the opposite. The general he played was very heavy. He's like, this is great. I can drink and eat whatever I want. And he actually had promised his wife he was going to take a break from making movies. He goes, unless Christopher Nolan calls me. There you go. Yeah. All right. See what else we got here. Oh, and then the scientists noted the chances are, quote, near zero of an atmospheric ignition from the chain reaction. Okay. Near zero.
How near zero?
Right, yeah. So the implosion test fails. There was rain on the night of the real test, and they delayed it until 5:30 a.m. Oppenheimer makes a speech afterwards, and visions of destruction are in his head. Do you remember when everyone's applauding him and he's giving the speech and he's got the visions of the destruction and the young girl whose face kind of peels off?
Yes.
Okay, so the girl was actually played by Nolan's daughter. And he said he did it to kind of remind himself about the effects of real people from this.
From the explosion.
Right. Okay. Oh, Klaus Fuchs, who was kind of a minor character, emerged as a spy for the Russians. And then, did Oppenheimer know? The film sort of makes the case he didn't. We don't know. We can suspect he didn't. There was something else I'll get to because Fuchs was not the only one who was actually a spy there, but the film ignored the other character. I'll get to that later.
But I think it's an important thing, but he wanted it universal. That's the whole thing. He wanted the
point.
world to know.
Good point.
Excuse me, I
It's really hard to talk this way. I'm sorry, I'll try, but
He wanted the world to know what?
he wanted the world to be a part of this.
Right.
He did not want to only be the US.
Right.
So chances are he did know that there were spies.
He may have. That's the question. Oppenheimer may have known there were amongst the group of people he got in there. There could have been another spy or a spy. Under Strauss's urging, Borden writes a letter to Hoover calling Oppenheimer a communist and an agent of Russia. At the Senate confirmation hearings, Professor Hill, who was played by Rami Malek, who played in Bohemian Rhapsody, played Freddie Mercury. His one big scene. He was in the movie, but barely. And then he has the one big scene where he testifies against Strauss. And it revealed the behind the scenes sabotage of Oppenheimer that Strauss had orchestrated. Okay, and there was a line in that Oppenheimer said when one of his friends was asking him why he was going to the hearings to try to get his clearance, security clearance. And it was like a staged court, you know, which came out later, but, and someone says, why are you putting yourself through this? He says, I have my reasons. My hunch is, and I couldn't really see anything to back it up, but his reasons was he wanted it on the record, and then he somehow got the record to Hill, who used it in the testimony. Because Hill wasn't in there, how did he know? When Hill was testifying on the stuff Strauss did, but I'm thinking Oppenheimer got the records of the whole fake trial and gave it to him. And he was able to use it against Strauss, and that's why he had it documented.
Could I, so.
Sure.
I just to kind of go back a little bit, when he was speaking to the team.
His team?
His team at Los Alamos. And he had this enthusiasm for the success of the bomb against the Japanese and how he regretted he didn't have a chance to drop it on Berlin. Did that strike you as a little out of character for him, a little forced? That didn't seem in nature for what the man was.
Well, from what I read, Oppenheimer had this ability to sort of see ramifications, but he was also naive. And he kind of, the thought was he didn't really see the ramifications until after the test.
Afterwards.
And then he got it, and then it kind of hit him. So he may not have realized the full impact at the time he made that statement.
Yeah.
And it may have come to him later. So there was, you know, he was a complex guy. He was, I mean, he had the mistresses but he loved his wife, but it was complex. He wasn't a simple guy to figure out.
I thought that was one of the main, that was one of the main aspects of the movie about his
Right,
personality and who
Right.
he was
right,
that the naivete and afterwards the guilt.
right, right. Okay, and then he had the conversation with Einstein about the chain reaction. And they talk about how what they started went around the world, and all right.
I have to make one comment about, one of the early scenes is when he meets Einstein and the hat goes flying off.
Yes.
Right?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, first of all, how did they do that? That was kind of fun, but it was foreshadowing, of course.
Right.
But I didn't know that till much, much later, that it was foreshadowing, but the hat that struck me, right? Why did they do that?
Yeah.
I thought that Einstein would be more involved in the film. I was surprised that he hardly had, it was just a very
Well,
short.
his comment about
segment.
that was, he said, that's behind me, you know? He was like, he felt.
My
he was
time
past
is
his
over.
prime.
His comment was basically, what goes around comes around. They did it to me, and now they're doing it
Right,
to you.
exactly. He did warn Oppenheimer.
They did
that
it to
that's the way
you,
it
to
worked.
me, now they're doing it to you,
Right,
which is why I don't believe that he knew they were spies. Because Einstein made a point of saying, you love this country more than the country loves
right,
you.
right. Good point.
No, I think that,
Also, it could be his naivety that he didn't think anyone would be spying too. That could be it too.
but I thought it was about the ethics. It was all about, now you have the guilt.
Right,
Einstein started it, and then now he is the father of the bomb. And that's all guilt, and that's what I thought Einstein was saying to him, you have the whole burden now forever.
right, correct.
Passing it along.
Well, until Edward Teller took over.
Right.
Happily.
But they went out, but they also said Einstein's, whatever he did, that was old work.
Right,
This is new.
Right.
Well, your new work is now old work too.
Yeah.
They went from the one bomb to the hydrogen bomb,
Right.
the atom bomb to the hydrogen.
and Einstein even said he didn't think he was a great mathematician. He said, you've had better mathematicians who could work on this. So, okay. So the critics were pretty much overwhelmingly positive. Some words like masterpiece, dazzling, mastery of craft. One comment was kind of interesting. What might be surprising is that dropping the bomb is not that moment in history. Nolan is more interested in how one misinterpretation of a conversation can have long-lasting effects. Okay, a guy in Memphis, the Memphis Flyer writes, Oppenheimer is a return to form for Nolan after the fiasco of Tenet. I think it was a fiasco. There's a great movie hiding amidst all of the formal pyrotechnics, but I guess it's too much to ask for a lighter touch from a director who is about as subtle as an atomic bomb. Okay, Oppenheimer is ultimately a cautionary tale about ego, politics, and power, a true modern epic. In Cinema Site, Wesley Lovell wrote, as increasing tensions with Russia rise once again, it seems fitting that Oppenheimer sets forth the events that led to those initial tensions in the aftermath of World War II. A critic on ABC Radio in Australia, his summation was, "It's the bomb," and gave it 5 stars out of 5. Okay, and then another one, for a film so enmeshed in ideas and loaded with meaning and conversations and debates, scientific and moral, it's as visually compelling as it is narratively. It's Nolan's best film, master of adding tension where there is little, while deflating strenuous moments and creating an environment that is almost unbearable. Now, some of the negative comments. Cole Smithy, who's always a contrarian anyway, what promises to be Nolan's first cinematic masterpiece evaporates before our eyes. He said, the movie is not without its problems of editing. Overall, the quality of the film is good, but it's not without its problems of editing, variety of tempo, narrative format, and overuse of black and white sequences. A much smaller budget could have helped. Like Killers of the Flower Moon, this film pins its ending on a courtroom drama that sinks. I think that was more accurate on Killers of the Flower Moon. What promises to be Nolan's first cinematic masterpiece evaporates before our eyes. It's overlong running time, and then if it was cut 30 minutes, it might be 3 stars, but there isn't a masterpiece here to be carved from its original stone. A woman, Lee Lai, she's overseas somewhere. I was uncomfortable watching yet another film about tortured white male genius when the victims of the atrocities glossed over by Oppenheimer had no voice. She gave it an F. Okay.
Wow.
It wasn't about the victims.
Exactly, it wasn't. All right, Noah Berlatsky, he wrote, Nolan wallows in lazy, glib filmmaking designed to turn the incineration of hundreds of thousands into a mellow, righteous glow of self-congratulation. I don't agree with that, but that's his point of view. Another one, Ruben Rosario in Miami's Art Zine writes, his latest effort is too much of an endurance test, a magnum opus consumed by its quest for significance. To give credit where credit is due, Nolan nails the money shot sequence, the do or die nuclear test. But then it dawns on you that the movie's not quite done, not even close. In what feels like an additional hour, and then you know it's a bit less, but goodness, you feel the length. Oppenheimer returns to the hearings and dives headlong into the ripple effects of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. That's when the spotlight shines on Robert Downey Jr.'s Louis Strauss, businessman, philanthropist, naval officer, member of the Atomic Energy Commission, and ostensible helping hand to an embattled Oppenheimer besieged by attacks on his character. Downey takes the juicy role and runs with it. The Iron Man star helps anchor several scenes where Strauss, up for cabinet post in the Eisenhower administration several years after the hearings, is grilled by senators about Oppenheimer and the nuclear program. Okay. Subtlety is not a Nolan specialty, and Oppenheimer fuses his strengths and self-indulgent tendencies into a maelstrom of sound and fury that bring to mind Oliver Stone in full tilt JFK mode. Which is interesting he said that, because Nolan did say Oliver Stone's JFK helped inspire him on how to do a complex biography film, because this was his first biography film.
Another critic said it.
Some of the intricate cross-cutting also recalls Terrence Malick, The Tree of Life in particular, but Nolan and his bells and whistles lack Malick's humility before the infinite. To be fair, Oppenheimer is a sizable step up from Tenet, that's toppled by its convoluted, time-hopping spy games. But it's too much of an endurance test. Caught in the middle is a uniformly strong cast made up of too many other familiar faces to name here. As for Murphy, the Peaky Blinders star rises above the chaos. It's a pity the movie ends up imploding. It's adroitly conceived puzzle pieces coming apart in a reign of noble intentions and unmitigated ego. Okay, again, it's just one opinion, but 93% of the critics really were very, very positive on it. A few dissenters. Yeah, gotta be some.
So do you
Okay.
believe that Strauss had another agenda? I mean, just because he got made fun of in a hearing doesn't necessarily make you believe he's out to assassinate somebody.
From
It's
the first time
character.
he met him, Oppenheimer was putting him down. He even made their joke about a shoe salesman. He made negative reference to him the whole time. He kept diminishing him. And that was Oppenheimer's ego and Strauss's ego being bruised and wanting vengeance, apparently. I mean, that kind of became clear. So I've got a whole bunch. I actually had 36 pages of notes, which I cut down by about 13. But yeah, right? It was hard. But there were so many pages and pages of trivia notes that were fascinating and fun, and I just tried picking some of the best. So I told you about Matt Damon being on a break and Nolan offered him. That was the only one he would have taken the call for. Several scenes were shot on location at Princeton, where Tom Conti was playing Einstein. And he said he found it, quote, really very funny, unquote, to walk through Princeton and have people react to him dressed as Einstein. A guy named David Wargo studied physics at MIT. He optioned the rights to American Prometheus, which is the book the film was made on. In 2015, but the project languished in development hell for years. Wargo met with his old friend, James Woods, during the pandemic, and Woods set up a meeting with Charles Roven, who in turn passed on the book to Nolan. Wargo and Woods are credited executive producers. What helped Nolan to decide the film was a book of Oppenheimer's speeches given to him by the actor Robert Pattinson at the wrap party of his previous film, Tenet, in 2020. The hearing room, the AAC hearing room, which where Oppenheimer was grilled in that small room, they used an existing office with 4 walls and no air conditioning. Nolan wanted the claustrophobia for the actors to be genuine and set a challenge for filming within limited space, especially for the huge 70mm IMAX cameras. And they couldn't move anything, so they just had to kind of make do. He and the other crew members had to crouch out of camera angle or sit on the floor during filming. The cinematographer, Oida van Hoytema, when interviewed on a Dutch talk show, said that not a single frame in the movie was storyboarded, which is kind of shocking for a movie on this scale.
Storyboarded, laid out.
Where they lay it all out. I mean, if you're familiar with Hitchcock's work at all, Hitchcock did such careful storyboarding, he didn't need to be on set to direct the movie. It was all in the storyboards. He laid everything out, shot by shot, angle by angle. It was all very clear. This is the opposite, which is kind of shocking for a $100 million movie. Okay. All right, so you talked about it was hard to understand some of the dialogue. A lot of that had to do with the IMAX cameras. Usually when they use IMAX cameras, which can be noisy, they overdub the audio later in the studio. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted to capture the conversations as they were happening with the actors in the room at the time. So that contributed to the muddy sound. But I did read about that because I wondered about that too. Okay, Nolan required the cast to rehearse in full costume and be properly dressed before coming on set. Any actor caught wearing modern clothing would be given a long, hard stare until they changed. This was done out of the belief that it could keep the cast ready to shoot at a moment's notice and prevent delays. Remember, he originally had an 87-day shooting schedule. He cut it to 55. According to an article in the Times about the movie in July of 2023, American Prometheus, the author, Kai Bird, there were 2 authors. One of them passed away when they started shooting the film of the book. Kai Bird was the one who survived. They visited the set in Los Alamos, and upon arrival, he was stunned at Cillian Murphy's resemblance to Oppenheimer. And the two had the following exchange. "Dr. Oppenheimer, I've been waiting decades to meet you," Bird said, and Murphy just laughed. "We've all been reading your book," he told them. "It's mandatory reading around here." Nolan said, and this is kind of funny, his first encounter with the name Oppenheimer was in the lyrics of a song by Sting called "The Russians" from his 1985 album, The Dream of the Blue Turtles. And the line in the song was, "How can I save my little boy from Oppenheimer's deadly toy?" This is Robert Downey Jr.'s favorite film he was in. It premiered in London. He said, "Just going to flat out say it, the best film I've ever been in." Any comments at this point? Nope. Okay. Oliver Stone said of this film, I sat through 3 hours of Oppenheimer gripped by Nolan's narrative. His screenplay is layered and fascinating. He was familiar with the book. He said, I once turned the project down because I couldn't find my way to its essence, but Nolan has found it. Pretty much the entire cast signed on just to work with Nolan, despite some, like Gary Oldman, only appearing for one scene and taking hefty salary cuts. You'd think $100 million movie, they wouldn't have to take cuts, but if you think of the cast, everyone was in it. The scope of the movie, a 55-day shooting schedule, it was on IMAX. They had to create and build sets. The whole Los Alamos set had to be built from scratch in the desert. And originally they were going to do it as models. And he's like, no, build the actual set. And they're like, oh my God, we can't do this. You're cutting the shooting schedule. I got to take buildings out. And they had a little model, and the set designer was like, I'm taking this out and this out. Can you live with that? Okay. You know, that was the way it kind of went. And then they actually built it, and they had to do it quick. Denis Villeneuve, who did the Dune movies, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and Incendies, he said of this film, where Oppenheimer is right now has blown the roof off of my projection. It's a 3-hour movie about people talking about nuclear physics. There's this notion that movies in some people's mind became content instead of an art form. I hate that word, content. Movies like Oppenheimer are released on the big screen. They become an event and brings back a spotlight on the idea that it's a tremendous art form that needs to be experienced in theaters. Okay, now here I did have a note here. This is from IMDb, the Internet Movie Database. The scenes from Oppenheimer's perspective are in color, and the scenes from Strauss's perspective are the ones in black and white. Another comment later said the black and white scenes represent objective moments in history devoid of opinion or emotions. The color scenes are subjective and showcase Oppenheimer's perspective, exploring his moral battle with creating the atomic bomb. Again, I don't think it holds all the way, but it's an interesting explanation. Oppenheimer himself was enthused to work with Robert Downey Jr. He considered his portrayal of Tony Stark in Iron Man to be one of the greatest casting decisions in the history of movies. Frankly, I would agree with that. If you ever saw the Iron Man movies, he is amazing. They wouldn't give an Oscar to someone who played in Iron Man, but he should have gotten it. It was that good. Okay. Oh, actually, remember I said Oppenheimer was 5'11" and weighed an average of 128 pounds? Under the pressure of doing the Manhattan Project, he dropped to 115 pounds. Yeah, at 5'11". Now, in the movie, this is a real minuscule bit of trivia, but it goes to show the production details. The kitchen in Oppenheimer's house, the curtains had ginkgo tree leaves on them. Why is that significant? A group of ginkgo trees was what famously managed to survive the Hiroshima bombings.
Wow.
Isn't that wild trivia? So the co-author besides Kai Bird of the book was Martin Sherwin. He'd been diagnosed with cancer as discussions were taking place to do the movie, and he died while the movie was being shot. Okay, the production designer talking about cutting the 30 days. It felt like $100 million indie movie. This is not Tenet. Chris wanted to shoot all over the United States. Just plane tickets alone and putting crew up all over the place is expensive. Not to mention I had to build Los Alamos that didn't exist. That's where I really felt like it was impossible. And then Chris said, forget the money, let's just design what we want. So that's what we did. And when construction first budgeted my town, it was $20 million. Chris was like, yeah, no, stop. So he said she started pulling buildings out of the model. And then they were going to shoot in New York, New Jersey, Berkeley, and Los Angeles, and New Mexico. So, okay, then they cut it back to the 55 days. And she said, at this point, you feel like I have to deliver above and beyond because he just went and gave up his days to shoot. He more than anyone knows what he wants to get in every single day and how he wants to get it. And he goes from 85 to 55 days. Okay, and again, this was Cillian Murphy's 5th movie with Christopher Nolan, but it was the first time he had a lead role. Okay, now as far as why he didn't use computer-generated imagery, CGIs, Nolan said in an interview, it's an artistic choice because I feel computer graphics sophisticated and versatile that they are, and extraordinary work has been done with them, they tend to feel a little safe to me. They tend to play more in the world of animation, so it's difficult to get that threat from them, particularly in a film where the rest of the tone is very realistic and textured. I think any tool, whether AI generated, computer based, or whatever, it's all another tool for filmmakers to create with. So long as we have faith in our human beings creating those tools, the medium of film will continue to develop in exciting ways. Okay, when Oppenheimer was asked what he wanted to name the bomb at Los Alamos, he mutters, "Batter my heart, three-person God," before saying Trinity. This is from the first line of John Donne's Holy Sonnet 14, which refers to the Holy Trinity. Cillian Murphy studied Oppenheimer's voice, and he also based his voice on Orson Welles and Fred Rogers. But that was pretty funny. That already. Okay, when Nolan left a note for Cillian Murphy's copy of the script, it said, "Dearest Cillian, finally a chance to see you lead. Love, Chris." That was the note he put on the script. Rami Malek made such an impact in his brief role testifying as David Hill, the real life scientist, that the real life scientist gained a Wikipedia article 3 days after the film's release. No, we'll do that. To keep the production within budget, the cast and crew were booked in Holiday Inn hotel rooms, standard rooms, and Nolan made no exception for himself and his wife, the co-producer Emma Thomas. Robert Downey Jr. candidly admitted he opted to pay for his own hotel elsewhere.
Robert Downey Jr. what?
Paid for his own hotel elsewhere.
When they were, are you able to go and click and let somebody in? Someone's on the, they got bounced out. So you got to move the mouse up to the blue button and just hit it.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Yep.
we're taking
care
of it.
All right, thank you. It should come
Yeah.
on now.
Yeah, we're let's do it. Okay,
There they go.
all right, bye.
All right. Oh, so they keep the cast and crew are booked in the hotel rooms, and the other thing was, they were given a per diem of $300 to spend as needed. And Robert Downey Jr., when told that was it, laughed and said, "Yeah, that'll about cover my dry cleaning." Nolan once mentioned he woke up in the middle of the night with the last 3 to 4 scenes of the film figured out, and he ran to write it right away on a pad. What he wrote remained unchanged until the very filming of the movie. He said the similarity of the scene where Oppenheimer first wears his trademark hat and pipe, and the scenes of his Batman trilogy where Bruce Wayne puts on his bat suit were intentional to show that Oppenheimer is a real-life superhero of sorts, with his magic power being the harnessing of atomic energy. And also, if you've seen his Batman movies at all, there's a very big dark side that the character has to deal with, of what the consequences of their actions and things. So there is a similarity there. Now, remember the scene with Truman? Okay, did you believe it? You believe it really happened?
Not that way,
It is true.
Yes.
but it didn't happen that way.
It's close. He didn't actually make the comment about crybaby while he was in the room. He waited until he left the room.
Showed that he was outside the door.
Yeah, right. So they sort of hedged on it. But it says Truman's annoyance at Oppenheimer's, quote, blood on his hands, quote, comment makes perfect sense given Harry Truman had been involved in far greater military decisions with far more death even before the bombings. The Battle of Okinawa, for example, killed 250,000 people on both sides. And every day of the Pacific War was costing tens of thousands of mostly civilian deaths. Truman also was a World War I artilleryman and proved to be a very capable artillery officer, displaying great courage and initiative while under enemy fire. So he had personal experience of battle and had directly killed people, while Oppenheimer was a scientist who never served in the military, which may have contributed to Truman's historically accurate reaction. Okay. Oh, Nolan printed the script when he handed it out to everyone in black ink on red paper. Know why he did that? Couldn't be copied. Very, very hard to copy it
Hard to.
on red paper.
It's hard to copy red paper,
Um,
to make a copy of it.
okay. Long time ago, the producer Hal Wallace commissioned Ayn Rand to write a film about the Manhattan Project titled Top Secret, just after the end of World War II. She wanted the film to show the atom bomb was a great achievement of the human mind and that it can be done only by free minds. She interviewed several key figures, including Oppenheimer, Leslie Groves, who was the Matt Damon character, Kenneth Nichols and Frederick Rhines, as well as Oppenheimer's wife, Kitty. Wallace unexpectedly sold the project to MGM and the script was shelved. Rand's experiences with Oppenheimer inspired the character of Robert Stadler in her novel Atlas Shrugged. Most films of this scale require at least a year of pre-production and several months of principal production, followed by another year of post-production. Nolan only took 3 months for prep, which included the building of Los Alamos as it looked during the project, and shot the whole thing, and it ended up being 57 days. The working title of the movie was Gadget.
Gadget.
Interesting.
That was the working title.
Right.
Gadget.
Um,
A small gadget.
Okay, during an Oppenheimer panel discussion featuring Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh, and Jamie Dornan was the moderator, Pugh revealed, now remember, she played the woman who had the affair with, who died in the tub, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Pugh revealed the camera broke during her and Murphy's sex scene, and they had to lie in bed holding each other naked while the crew tried to fix it. Trying to ignore the awkwardness of the moment, she started a conversation with the crew about what they were doing because she was interested in learning more about the camera and production while she's sitting there naked. The writer-director, Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver among many other films, called this, quote, the best, most important film of this century after he attended the New York premiere. The Los Alamos shots were actually filmed in Abiquiu, New Mexico. Pedernal Peak, made famous by Georgia O'Keeffe, is prominent in the background of several shots. Cillian Murphy didn't need to audition. He said he recalled the moment when he received a casual call from Nolan, who explained he had the perfect lead role for him. And Murphy said, if you're lucky, you get 1 or 2 of those calls in your career, you know? It was the best feeling. It was kind of euphoric. And then you go, oh, that's a lot of work. So I immediately just started working. I had like 6 months between when he called me and we started the shoot. The script was solid and was there. It was one of the greatest scripts I've ever read. It was magnificent. Okay, this is, all right, right. How are we doing on time? Okay, well, yeah, about time to wrap up. Okay. Okay, the first person Nolan showed the film to outside of the studio was Steven Spielberg. And at the Academy Awards, Spielberg was the one who presented him the Best Director Oscar.
Wow.
Now, Nolan wanted to make a biopic. This was the first one he did, a biography picture. He wanted to do one on Howard Hughes, and he wanted to star Jim Carrey as Howard Hughes. But he gave it up after Martin Scorsese came out with The Aviator in 2004 with Leonardo DiCaprio, which was about Howard Hughes. Yeah. Okay, Cillian Murphy revealed in an interview, there's no deleted scenes in Nolan movies. That's why there are no DVD extras on the movie, because the script is the movie. He knows exactly what's going to end up. He's not fiddling around with it, trying to change the story. That's the movie. Oh, this is funny. When Robert Downey Jr. won the Golden Globe for this film, Rob Lowe watched his speech and said, I'm so excited for him. So I texted him, so glad you won. That is the most beautiful acceptance speech I've ever heard in a long time. Boy, do you deserve it. I hit send, and then I realized, oh crap, I just sent that to Bradley Cooper.
To Bradley Cooper.
I thought that was pretty good. Okay, now the money, 15% of the first dollar gross. So yeah, he was getting money even before the movie recouped its budget. Christopher Nolan. So yeah, they estimated he made $72 million from the movie, and someone else, Forbes, actually thought that it was closer to 85 million. It's the 5th highest grossing movie worldwide that runs 3 hours or longer. There's an Avengers movie, and one of the Avatars, Titanic, and The Lord of the Rings are the others.
What did Cillian make?
I did not see that. Yeah, good question. Very good question. I need to see that. Oh, Emily Blunt, who played Murphy's Oppenheimer's wife, is called Murphy the best actor she's ever worked with, and also her favorite to act with. She expressed admiration for his ability to slip into character the moment action was called and returning to himself immediately after hearing cut.
Oh, you were gonna talk about that.
Yes, the bath scene. Okay. So the bath scene where she dies, thank you. Do you remember, it was kind of ruled a suicide?
Yeah.
But if you remember real close, real quick, there was a shot of a gloved hand pushing her head underwater.
Yes.
It was never explained. The movie didn't explain it. Historically, we don't know if she committed suicide or not. It was kind of vague. So they don't know if she was murdered. Nolan putting that in made you think maybe she was killed.
Well,
Now
yeah,
remember, she was a communist.
because that intelligence officer who grilled
Right.
Oppenheimer,
Gordon, right?
Yeah. no, it wasn't Borden. There was
Oh, Ross or Rob,
Yeah,
whatever his name was,
yeah.
Rob.
he indicated that don't leave prisoners or any dangling participles around.
Right, good.
And then you saw that scene.
Very good point, very good point, right. So they were sort of implying she was killed, not the suicide. Yeah. Okay, Niles Bohr calls Oppenheimer the American Prometheus in the film. That's the Kenneth Branagh character, who Oppenheimer looked up to as a teacher. And Bohr issues a warning about mankind not being ready for the scientific achievement towards which Oppenheimer is striving with the creation of the atom bomb. So Bohr is played by Kenneth Branagh, who also directed and played the title role in Frankenstein, based on a book with the subtitle The Modern Prometheus. So that kind of comes full circle. Okay. All right. So the last point I wanted to get to, yes. The first shot of the film is of water rippling across the surface of a puddle in the rain. It appears alongside images of the subatomic world to represent Oppenheimer's preoccupation with the hidden world of physics. Later, Oppenheimer is haunted by the image of those same water ripples appearing on a map of Russia. So USSR, actually, representing the devastation of all-out nuclear war and the chain reaction of political decisions that might end up destroying the world. The image recurs one last time at the end, when Oppenheimer bitterly says the bomb may have already started that chain reaction. Okay, that is pretty much all I have. One little thing. You remember where the scene where Kitty Oppenheimer refused to shake Teller's hand after his testimony? That happened in real life, and Teller cried after she publicly rejected him. Thought that was kind of interesting too. And I have some good news to end it up with. Yes.
I just wanted to, I had a thought, we're talking about the black and white versus the colors, full color. And I think to my mind, that could be very obvious. I mean, once you think about it, that could be an obvious dynamic he did to make it the difference between one and another. But when you mentioned that he didn't use any
Computer generated images.
yes, he didn't use any computer generated images. That is the same thing, only in such a subtle way. It's the same thing. That is, if you do a computer generated image, it won't fit. Whereas if you do the regular stuff, it's perfect, it will fit. But it's nothing that I didn't pick that up, during the film. I don't know if anybody did or not.
Yeah, computer generated images, it used to be pretty easy to tell. It's gotten harder. I mean, like when you see a Twister movie or something like that, you pretty much can tell. But I actually figured I just assumed because of the budget of the movie, they used computer images in this movie, and I was kind of shocked to learn they didn't. So, but I thought, oh, I guess they've come a long way. They look pretty real. Well, now we know why. All right, so there's a funny little note I have here. Sort of funny. As portrayed in the film, Niles Bohr was actually Jewish. He was smuggled out of Nazi-occupied Denmark by neutral Sweden so he could work on the project. However, he refused to travel to America unless Sweden opened its borders to Jewish Danes fleeing Nazi rule. Ultimately, 99% of Denmark's Jewish population was saved from the Holocaust. The Trinity test is a combination of many different filmed explosions, but Nolan claimed that the large pyrotechnic explosions were detonated on location to be captured on camera with actors in the frame, and also to produce genuine reactions from the cast at the light, noise, and shock waves. Okay, I mentioned that. Oh, for the scene near the end where Louis Strauss loses his composure and rants about Oppenheimer, Nolan deliberately asked Downey Jr. for another take after he had told him he had absolutely given it his all for the day. Nolan wanted the exasperation to show in his performance. So before the Strauss's Senate hearing, his aide says to him, Senator Thurmond, and yes, that is Strom Thurmond. He's been around that long. He asked me to say not to feel you're on trial, to which Strauss replies, I didn't till you said that. Thurmond wrote to Eisenhower recommending Strauss be nominated as Secretary of Commerce, but as we know it, he was denied. Okay, this was Robert Downey Jr., it says, is typically associated with playing flawed but heroic, lovable rogues. In this film, he plays a rare antagonistic role in the form of Strauss, a vindictive and petty man who tries to destroy Oppenheimer's career and reputation while pretending to be a supportive work colleague. And the scene, Roger Robb, was grilling Oppenheimer about the use of the atom bomb. Nolan raised the tension on the set by directing Jason Clarke, who played Robb, to unexpectedly stand up and start yelling his lines at Cillian Murphy only inches from his face, just outside of the camera range, during the latter's tight close-up. So they would have a close-up on Cillian Murphy with the guy yelling like right behind the camera. So it would kind of make him tense up a little. There was a little scene where they swapped out a lamp. I didn't notice it. The lamp on the desk changes a day later. And the reason was it was showing that they intentionally changed it because they had one with a bug device in it.
Oh.
So that's why they swapped it out. I mean, stuff, who would, you wouldn't notice. All right, and then where's that last note I wanted to read for you guys? That's kind of cool. Okay. Oh, they talked about saving Kyoto. That was real. Because they didn't,
That's the honeymoon there.
well, the art, history, the cultural stuff.
That is something, apparently there was a dispute between the European and Pacific Theater generals about where the bomb should be dropped. And when the European theater generals heard that the bomb was being dropped on a civilian target, their response was, then that doesn't make us any different than the people we've been fighting for 4 years.
Yeah.
I think it was Eisenhower. That said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense because
There was another-
the Allies bombed the heck out of Dresden
Well, that's
and
what
everything else,
that
so.
was a British bombing, but
There
yeah.
was, there was another comment like that, where someone said basically that, if you're gonna drop a bomb, you don't wanna drop it on a Christian nation, drop it on those Japs. That was the quote, really.
Oh, boy. Okay, here it is. Early in the film, Oppenheimer is seen reading a book. T.S. Eliot's apocalyptic poem, The Wasteland. Do you remember that scene? They didn't really show much in the way of showing books for the title. This one, they made sure you saw the title. It's a chaotic post-World War allegory that touches upon the themes of rejuvenation, death, sterility, stagnancy, Dematophilia drowning herself, mankind's continual destruction of entire cities, and the guardianship of the Holy Grail. The film begins with droplets of spring rain, as does the poem. The wasteland ends with a refining fire, a flash of light and thunder over a desolate, ruined world, and a broken man standing alone on a shore as uncertainty looms and droplets of rain fall rhythmically once again. So does the film. So that's it. All right.
Very nice.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Perfect. So tentatively, next time is probably August 22nd. I got to double check with the club. But that would be Thursday, August 22nd, because I was going to skip August, but I'm going to be away part of September. So we're going to do,
Do you know yet?
no, but you guys are going to help. You're going to send in your requests. But remember, it's got to be on either Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Max. So send me an email to catsreviews@gmail.com.
We do animal house?
One second, I just want to pause this.
Very nice.